Captain Daniel Hart stood at the edge of the starport, his boots resting lightly on the polished metal floor as the massive shadow of the Xylar capital loomed above him. The station hung suspended in space, a sprawling structure of silver and gold, its towers reaching like claws into the void. Daniel's team had prepared for this moment for months, running simulations, memorizing alien etiquette, and rehearsing every diplomatic protocol. Yet nothing had prepared him for the weight of reality. The Xylar Empire was not just vast, it was overwhelming. Every inch of the capital radiated power, authority, and an unspoken rule that all who entered bowed to the queen. Daniel's hand rested briefly on the hilt of his sidearm, not as a threat, but as a grounding reminder that he was a human among beings who viewed submission as instinct. His mind raced through the protocols one last time. The queen, Lyria, ruled with a psychic dominance that reached far beyond the physical. Entire species had bent their knees and minds to her for centuries. Her gaze could unravel the thoughts of the most cunning diplomat or general. And yet Daniel, humanity's representative, would not kneel. The doors to the grand hall opened with a hiss, revealing a chamber so vast it seemed to swallow sound itself. Golden light poured from crystalline pillars, reflecting off walls carved with scenes of conquest and triumph. The air hummed faintly with psychic energy, a resonance that prickled the nerves and tightened muscles without conscious thought. Delegates from countless species lined the hall, their forms ranging from the insectoid to the serpentine, all kneeling as one before the throne at the far end. Daniel paused, taking in the scene. His fellow humans had already entered and knelt as expected. Diplomats, scientists, and officers alike had followed the standard protocol, their heads bowed, hands on the floor. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to follow, to obey, to ensure humanity's survival through conformity. Yet another part of him, older, deeper, refused. He could not kneel to someone who viewed entire civilizations as toys to be ruled. Not for diplomacy, not for survival. The sound of his boots clicking against the polished floor echoed through the chamber. Every eye turned to him, a ripple of shock moving across the kneeling delegates. Whispers passed like a current through the room. Daniel did not falter. He walked with steady steps, his gaze forward, shoulders squared, until he stood directly before the throne. And then he looked up. Lyria, the alien queen, sat with an elegance that was both alien and terrifying. Her form shimmered, shifting slightly in color and shape, as if her body were a living projection of energy and thought. Eyes like molten gold fixed on Daniel, piercing through the space between them, reading the very edges of his mind. She was silent, yet her presence spoke louder than any words. The delegates shrank further into their kneeling positions, some trembling, some whispering prayers. Daniel felt none of that fear. Instead, his heart thumped with a strange mix of adrenaline and clarity. "You are late," a voice finally spoke. Smooth, melodic, yet imbued with an authority that made the hall vibrate. Daniel recognized it immediately as Lyria's. "I am on time," Daniel replied, his voice firm, echoing slightly against the crystalline walls. "The humans do not kneel. And yet you stand. I have finally found my husband." "I am not." Yet he also sensed a strange respect, something he had never felt from any alien civilization before. This was not fear, this was fascination. And fascination, he knew, could turn into an ally or a weapon. A Xylar aide stepped forward, bowing low. "Your Majesty, the human will not kneel. Shall I enforce submission?" "Let me see what humans are capable of when left to themselves." They adapted, improvised, and overcame. And now, in the heart of the Xylar Empire, Daniel realized that same principle applied. "Very well," he said finally, his voice carrying across the chamber. "I will not kneel, I will not bow, but I am here to negotiate, to find a path that allows humans to live and prosper alongside you." Lyria leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing as if measuring his soul. "Bold words," she said softly. "Few dare to speak them in my presence. You may proceed, human, but understand this, every choice you make will be watched and every failure will be remembered." "I understand." In that moment he embodied the human spirit, defiant, resilient, and unyielding. As he walked, a Xylar historian approached, her form elongated and adorned with flowing patterns of light that pulsed with her thoughts. "Human," she said, her voice a blend of musical notes and harmonic resonance, "you have survived the first test merely by standing, but you do not yet know what awaits." The queen does not smile without reason. "And that, human, is both your strength and your burden." Inside, representatives of the Xylar Empire waited, Military strategists with eyes like polished obsidian psychic seers who seemed to flicker in and out of reality, and scholars whose very presence radiated intellect. Every one of them watched him, measuring him, testing him with unspoken scrutiny. The human team followed him, each member tense but resolute. They were aware of the stakes. One misstep could lead to war or worse, captivity. Daniel took a deep breath, centering himself. He had faced impossible odds before on Earth and in space, but nothing had prepared him for the subtle complexity of the Xylar court. "Humans," Lyria said, her voice resonating through the chamber, "you are here because I am curious. Curiosity is rare in my experience. Most species submit, most fear, most fail. You have done none of these. Tell me, human, why do you not kneel? If you want my cooperation, you will treat me as a partner, not a subject. Perhaps this, human, is the one who can balance me." As the council session began, Daniel prepared himself for what would come next. Trials, negotiations, and tests awaited him. The Xylar Empire was a galaxy of impossible challenges, and humanity had just planted its flag of defiance. The Queen's curiosity had been piqued, her attention fixed. For the first time in centuries, a human stood not as a subject, but as a potential equal, capable of surprising even the most powerful being in the universe. And Daniel Hart, captain of Earth's first interstellar diplomatic mission, knew that standing tall today was only the beginning. The story of humanity's ingenuity, courage, and refusal to bow had begun, and the galaxy was about to take notice. Captain Daniel Hart stepped deeper into the heart of the Xylar capital, feeling the weight of unseen eyes pressing from every angle. The hallways twisted in impossible geometry, smooth surfaces reflecting light that seemed alive, as though the very walls were aware of every footstep. His human team followed closely, their expressions tense but resolute. They had expected alien diplomacy to be strange, but nothing prepared them for the subtle, omnipresent scrutiny of the Xylar Empire. "Captain," said Lieutenant Mara Chen, his communications officer, "I still don't understand why the Queen calls you her husband. What does it even mean?" The floor was polished black stone, reflecting the pillars of glowing energy that lined the walls. At the far end, a platform rose, and upon it hovered a device unlike any human technology. It pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, and Daniel could sense faint psychic waves emanating from it. "This is your first trial," the voice of Lyria resonated in the chamber, though she was nowhere to be seen. "It is not a test of strength, nor of weapons, nor of courage alone. It is a test of mind, of ingenuity. You will face an obstacle that has broken every other species I have chosen. Survive it, and you will have earned my curiosity. Fail, and you will not leave this chamber." His instincts had been honed in situations far worse than this, and he knew one simple truth. Alien logic was rigid, human logic was flexible. Where they saw only patterns, humans saw possibilities. Where they feared deviation, humans created new paths. A wall of shimmering energy rose before him. Within it, complex symbols rotated and shifted, forming patterns that defied comprehension. Daniel realized this was no ordinary puzzle. It was a psychic trap designed to ensnare the mind to force a species into predictable mistakes. He stepped closer, examining the symbols. They were not random, they followed rules, but rules unlike any human mathematical system. "Everyone else fails," whispered Mara. "They can't even begin to understand it. How can you? We think differently, we improvise, we don't just memorize patterns, we create solutions." He focused on the symbols, ignoring the faint psychic hum that sought to disturb his thoughts. Slowly, methodically, he began to map the shifting patterns to basic principles he could recognize: symmetry, repetition, and consequence. The aliens expected linear thinking. He thought in loops and tangents, testing possibilities mentally before acting. Minutes passed. The energy wall pulsed, attempting to sense doubt or fear. Daniel felt the psychic tug, a pressure that could crush minds weaker than his, but he did not falter. He moved deliberately, touching the panels with precise fingers, inputting sequences based on logical inference rather than instinct. The wall responded, adapting, becoming more complex, but he adapted faster. Finally, with a careful combination of intuition and deduction, the symbols aligned, the wall shimmered, and a path opened through it. Daniel stepped forward, his heart racing but steady. Behind him, Myra and the team followed, amazed. "You did it," she whispered, awe in her voice. "No one else could. That is why I have searched so long. It will test your adaptability under direct threat. Follow the path." They moved with synchronized precision, and Daniel could sense their psychic awareness, ready to detect hesitation or fear. These constructs, Lyria explained, her voice resonating through the deck, are designed to predict behavior. Most species are too rigid to avoid them. Humans, perhaps you can succeed. Each movement was predictable once he identified the rhythm. The other species would panic, rushing or freezing in fear. Humans, he reminded himself, thrived on unpredictability. Keep your mind clear, he told his team. Treat them like a puzzle, don't react emotionally. The psychic energy of the constructs attempted to destabilize him, a subtle pressure in his mind that made reality shimmer, but he focused on logic, timing, and rhythm. Each leap, each movement, required him to improvise, adjust, and adapt in ways the Xylar constructs could not anticipate. Mara followed, trusting his lead. Other human team members hesitated briefly, then found confidence in Daniel's decisions. Together, they moved like a single unit, but not in the predictable patterns of alien troops. Each human acted with creativity, changing strategies fluidly. The constructs became erratic, unable to predict the humans' improvisation. Daniel noted a small pattern in their failure. They adjusted too slowly to unconventional moves. He used this, leading the team in a complex series of jumps and feints that left the constructs spinning in midair, unable to maintain formation. At the final platform, Daniel paused. Behind him, the constructs floated in confusion, unable to continue their attack. He breathed deeply, the first sign of relief washing over him. He had done what no other species had achieved. He had outsmarted a psychic machine designed to be unstoppable. From above, Lyria's voice filled the chamber. Remarkable, truly remarkable. Humans, you do not fear the impossible, and your mind bends where others break. You are fascinating. Thank you, but I suspect there is more. Prepare yourself, human. You will make decisions, Lyria explained. Your choices will have consequences, others will watch, and the results will determine your place in this empire. His mind raced, recalling every tactical principle, every lesson in strategy and ethics he had learned. Humans were not just adaptable, they were resourceful, capable of moral judgment even under extreme stress. He stepped forward, analyzing the crises. One planet faced a devastating famine, another's atmosphere was destabilizing, a fleet of starships was trapped near a collapsing star. Daniel realized he could prioritize solutions, leveraging limited resources and anticipating consequences. The constructs that had tested him before now served as aids, translating psychic energy into data he could interpret. Minutes turned into hours as he made decisions, each one balancing risk, morality, and survival. His choices were unconventional, sometimes counterintuitive, but effective. He coordinated aid to the starving planet by redirecting nearby resources, stabilized the atmosphere of the threatened world using adaptive shields, and rescued the fleet by predicting the star's collapse before the Xylar systems could. When he finished, a silence filled the chamber. The constructs floated motionless, their energy subdued. Then Lyria appeared once more, her expression unreadable but her eyes glowing with approval. "You have done more than survive," she said softly. "You have exceeded my expectations. Most species would crumble, hesitate, or fail entirely. Humans, you act, adapt, and lead. That is why I have searched for you. But I am still only beginning to understand your empire. I will need guidance and cooperation to succeed. Unpredictable, necessary. And I will watch with great interest as you continue to prove your worth." They bent them, twisted them, and in doing so, surpassed limits that others believed unbreakable. As they left the chamber, Daniel understood the gravity of what lay ahead. The Xylar Empire was vast and ancient, filled with beings who underestimated humans at their peril. And Lyria, the enigmatic queen who called him her husband, had begun a journey with humanity that would test them in ways the galaxy had never seen. Daniel stepped into the light of the corridor, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline and determination. Humans had survived impossible odds on Earth, in space, and now before the Xylar Empire itself. Their ingenuity, courage, and refusal to bow had brought them this far. And Daniel Hart, captain of Earth's first interstellar mission, knew one thing with certainty: humanity was only beginning to show its true power. The trial had ended. But the story of humans among the stars had only begun. Captain Daniel Hart walked down the spiraling corridors of the Xylar capital, his boots echoing softly against the metallic floor. The trials had ended, but the weight of what he had accomplished pressed upon him. He had survived the impossible tests, outsmarted psychic constructs, and made choices that no other species could have executed. Yet Daniel knew this was only the beginning. In the shadows of the Empire, unseen dangers lingered. Some forces welcomed him, some feared him, and some planned against him. The Queen, Lyria, appeared suddenly, her form shimmering from the walls like liquid gold. She studied Daniel with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "You have survived what none have endured," she said. "But survival alone is meaningless. You must understand what it means to stand in the heart of my empire. I have ruled for centuries, but even I cannot control every current in my empire. You, human, may be the catalyst I need." They were a way to evaluate humans as potential allies or disruptors. Lyria's empire, magnificent though it was, relied on obedience. Humanity relied on creativity, and in that difference lay power. Over the next days, Daniel met with advisors, scholars, and strategists of the Xylar Empire. Some were open, curious to learn from a species that did not submit. Others were wary, their eyes cold, their words laced with suspicion. Every conversation, every interaction was a subtle negotiation. Daniel realized that surviving trials was one thing, surviving politics was another. A Xylar historian named Sira approached him one afternoon. Her elongated form shimmered with pulsing light, her eyes reflecting centuries of knowledge. "Captain Hart," she said, her voice melodic yet serious, "your presence here has unsettled the court. Some whisper that your influence may rival the Queen herself. Remember, the Queen's attention is rare, but dangerous. Even a hint of arrogance or misstep could turn the court against you. But beware, the court is patient, and patience can be a weapon." Advisors believed in rigid rules and tradition. Daniel saw patterns in their weaknesses, rigidity where adaptability was needed, blind obedience where creativity could flourish. One evening, Lyria summoned him to a private chamber suspended above the capital city. The room glowed with a soft light, reflecting the stars below. "You have observed much," she said, folding her hands. "What do you see?" "Most believe obedience is strength, but true strength is adaptability, innovation, courage. If you allow me, I can help you stabilize the empire, protect it from hidden threats, and ensure that your rule remains unchallenged. That is what humans understand best. And remember, failure carries consequences." He listened more than he spoke, noting subtle shifts in conversation, fleeting glances, and unspoken alliances. He discovered that some Xylar generals sought to provoke conflict with neighboring species to expand influence, while certain scholars hoarded information to manipulate the Queen's decisions. Hidden in plain sight, these threats could undermine Lyria if left unchecked. Daniel devised careful strategies to counteract them. He began with small interventions, subtle guidance to redirect fleets, discreetly revealing information that prevented internal sabotage, and leveraging human unpredictability to destabilize plots before they could fully form. The court began to notice results. Decisions that once led to delay or conflict now resolved with efficiency, often in ways that seemed counterintuitive to Xylar advisors but undeniably effective. One evening, as Daniel reviewed reports in his quarters, Mara Chen approached him. "Captain, you've changed the way the court thinks. Some are calling your methods unorthodox, even revolutionary, but they work. Do you realize what you're doing? We must be careful. The court does not forgive ambition or innovation lightly." The court murmured in surprise, some suspicious, others impressed. Lyria observed quietly, her smile faint but approving. In private, she praised him. "You see things others cannot, you act where they hesitate, and you influence without appearing to. That is the mark of a leader and perhaps a partner." He did not fully understand the meaning of partner in Xylar terms, but he understood the responsibility. Leadership was not about command alone. It was about influence, vision, and the courage to act when others could not. Humanity had mastered these qualities over centuries of struggle, war, and survival, and now he was applying them on a scale far beyond Earth. Over time, Daniel's influence grew. The court began to adapt to his methods, slowly recognizing that humans were unpredictable in a beneficial way. Where aliens saw disorder, Daniel saw opportunity. Where they feared deviation, he saw possibility. Even the most rigid advisors began to respect him, though some still whispered behind closed doors, questioning the Queen's interest in a human who refused to kneel. One night, Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the glowing city below, Mara at his side. "Do you ever wonder," she asked quietly, "if this is more than a trial?" If the Queen really intends something else. And the Queen, she seems fascinated by you. Using subtle intelligence, careful negotiation, and human ingenuity, he neutralized the threat without alerting the faction or causing conflict. The Queen observed silently from above, and Daniel sensed approval in her gaze. For the first time, he realized the depth of her challenge. She did not simply want loyalty. She wanted action, strategy, and intelligence that could match her own. In that moment, Daniel understood the true purpose of Lyria's interest in humanity. It was not conquest, not dominance. It was partnership. She sought a species capable of challenging her, of thinking beyond her empire's rigid structures. And humans, with their adaptability, courage, and unpredictability, were uniquely suited. Daniel stood tall, feeling the weight of responsibility. He was no longer simply a diplomat or a captain. He was a representative of humanity's potential in the galaxy. Every action, every choice, every decision mattered. The trials had tested him physically and mentally. Now he faced the subtler, more dangerous test of influence and leadership. And for the first time, Daniel realized that the Queen's smile when he refused to kneel was not just amusement, it was recognition. Recognition of strength, intelligence, and the one thing the Xylar Empire could never predict, the human spirit. In the corridors of the capital, as shadows shifted and whispers spread, Daniel Hart understood one undeniable truth: humanity had arrived. And in standing tall when all others bent, they had begun a new chapter in the history of the stars, a chapter of courage, ingenuity, and partnership that would challenge the very foundations of the galaxy. The Queen had found her catalyst. Humanity had found its place. And the story of survival, strategy, and the unpredictable brilliance of humans was only beginning. Captain Daniel Hart had learned that the Xylar Empire was beautiful, vast, and terrifying, but he also learned that its beauty hid danger. Hidden factions in the court had grown restless. Some generals believed the Queen's fascination with humans weakened her authority. Some advisors feared change and sought to regain power by subverting her decisions. And some outside forces, neighboring empires and rogue fleets, saw the subtle instability as an opportunity. Daniel could feel the tension in every corridor, in every council meeting. The calm exterior of the empire was only skin deep. One morning, Lyria summoned Daniel urgently. Her form shimmered with a sharper, almost urgent light than usual. "Captain Hart," she said, her voice cutting through the chamber like steel wrapped in silk, "the Empire faces a threat that requires immediate action. A faction within the outer fleets has seized control of a key star system. If they succeed, they could challenge my authority and destabilize multiple worlds. You will plan, coordinate, and act in a way no Xylar fleet would dare imagine." Standard Xylar tactics relied on overwhelming force, psychic coordination, and rigid formations. But Daniel saw flaws in their assumptions. The fleet commanders followed predictable patterns, the supply lines could be disrupted in subtle ways, and the rebels had underestimated unpredictability. "This," Daniel said to Mara and the rest of the team, "is exactly the kind of situation humans excel at. We improvise, we act when others hesitate, we use intelligence, not just strength. And that is how we win." Rather than confronting the fleet head-on, Daniel proposed using smaller, agile ships to cut off supply lines, sow confusion, and force the rebels into mistakes. Larger Xylar warships would remain in reserve, appearing only when necessary to strike decisively. When Daniel presented the plan to the Xylar commanders, some were skeptical. "Captain," said General Viren, a towering figure with metallic limbs, "this plan relies on unpredictability. That is dangerous. We are trained to follow orders and maintain formation. Deviation risks failure. Unpredictable actions force the enemy to react, and reaction under pressure leads to mistakes. Trust me, it works." Daniel coordinated attacks from the command ship, calling maneuvers that no Xylar captain would have imagined. Agile ships darted between asteroids, disrupting supply lines. Rebel ships attempted to predict human movements, but every action Daniel ordered was unexpected. When the enemy closed in, the humans exploited weaknesses, ambushing with calculated risk and improvisation. Hours passed. The rebel fleet was forced into retreat after a series of maneuvers that seemed chaotic, but were carefully orchestrated. Daniel had anticipated their every predictable response, using deception and surprise to neutralize the threat. By the time the Xylar warships joined the battle, the rebels were disorganized and defeated, surrendering to the humans rather than engaging in a final, desperate fight. Back on the capital, Lyria watched the reports with interest. "Remarkable," she murmured. "Humans act where others hesitate, improvise where others fear. You do not merely fight, you think, adapt, and lead. That is what makes you different. And that may be exactly what this empire needs." Daniel knew that winning battles was one thing, winning respect without provoking resentment was another. He returned to the capital to find a private meeting arranged with Lyria. The queen's presence was commanding, yet there was a flicker of amusement in her expression. "Captain Hart," she said, "you have acted decisively and wisely. Many would have failed, even among my own advisors. But tell me, what do you see from within my empire, now that you have led men and Xylers alike? That combination of creativity and courage can complement your rule if allowed." And she recognized that potential as a necessary counterbalance to her empire's rigidity. In the following weeks, Daniel worked tirelessly, coordinating with loyal Xylers and humans alike to stabilize regions of the empire under threat. He faced political sabotage, hidden plots, and factions seeking power. Each time, he relied on human ingenuity, improvising solutions, making split-second decisions, and acting unpredictably in ways that disrupted opponents without overt conflict. During one critical incident, a faction attempted to seize control of a communications hub that linked multiple systems. Daniel, noticing subtle discrepancies in the schedules and routines, anticipated the plot. Using a combination of human intuition and technical skill, he rerouted communications, intercepted the faction's plans, and neutralized the threat before it became visible. When the queen reviewed his actions, she was visibly impressed. "Few could have done this without discovery," she said. "Humans are remarkable." Daniel realized that leadership was not only about action, it was about perception. Winning a battle did not guarantee loyalty. It only provided a platform to influence others, to inspire them to see the value of adaptability, creativity, and courage. One evening, as Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city, Lyria joined him. Stars sparkled across the horizon, and the city below gleamed with light and energy. "You have done well," she said softly. "But know this, your victories have drawn attention. Allies and adversaries alike watch your every move, not all welcome change. That is what makes us different." He understood that respect and trust in the Xyler court were fragile. One misstep could undo months of careful diplomacy. Yet he also knew that humans excelled precisely where others failed, in unpredictable action and courage under pressure. In the days that followed, Daniel continued to strengthen his influence. He coordinated missions, advised the queen on strategic decisions, and subtly shifted the court's perspective to value creativity alongside obedience. Other species began to notice the human difference, some with admiration, some with suspicion. Daniel expected both. Humanity had always inspired awe and envy simultaneously. One morning, news arrived of a rebellion on a distant planet. Rebel forces had captured critical installations, and a local governor had called for immediate military intervention. The Xyler commanders prepared a standard response: direct assault, overwhelming force, minimal flexibility. Daniel reviewed the plans and shook his head. "That will not work," he said firmly. "The rebels expect predictability. We need to act in ways they cannot anticipate. We need improvisation, speed, and precision. Humans and adaptive Xylers can lead this. The outcome will be decisive." Using deception, calculated risk, and rapid improvisation, they neutralized the rebellion with minimal loss, freeing the installations and restoring control to the loyal governor. Once again, humans had achieved what conventional tactics could not. When the reports reached the queen, her voice carried both approval and intrigue. "You act in ways none of my advisors would dare. You improvise where others hesitate. You think where others follow blindly. Humans, perhaps I have underestimated your value." And now, in the heart of the Xyler Empire, those same qualities were saving lives, protecting systems, and earning trust that no other species could command. As he walked through the corridors later, Daniel reflected on the journey so far. The trials had tested mind and body. The fleets had tested leadership and strategy. And now, the Empire itself tested influence, perception, and morality. Every challenge had one lesson: human ingenuity and courage could achieve what others deemed impossible. And in that, Daniel understood why Lyria had smiled the day he refused to kneel. It was not mockery. It was recognition of strength, of spirit, and of a potential that no empire could ignore. The human race, small and fragile on its own, had proven that intelligence, courage, and adaptability could alter the balance of power across the stars. For the first time, Daniel felt the weight of not just surviving, but shaping the future of an empire. And he knew that greater challenges awaited, tests that would demand even more ingenuity, courage, and leadership. But one truth remained clear: humanity would meet them. They would adapt, they would act, and they would rise. The Xylar Empire had seen defiance, it had seen unpredictability, and it had begun to see the strength of humans. Captain Daniel Hart, standing tall, felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that in a galaxy ruled by rigid rules and fear, humans had proven themselves to be not just survivors, but catalysts of change. The battle for influence was far from over, but the first victories had been won. And Daniel understood that the story of humans in the Xylar Empire, once feared or ignored, was now becoming a force that could not be denied. Captain Daniel Hart stood on the observation deck of the Xylar capital, gazing at the stars stretching endlessly before him. The galaxy was alive with motion, ships gliding between worlds, fleets patrolling star systems, and distant planets teeming with life. Humanity had proven itself in trials, battles, and political arenas, yet Daniel knew that the greatest test was still ahead, not just surviving or influencing, but shaping a future that could endure. A message arrived from Lyria. Her holographic form shimmered before him, golden and radiant, her presence commanding attention even without words. "Captain Hart," she said, her voice calm yet filled with intensity, "the Empire faces its gravest threat yet. A coalition of rival species, long restrained by my authority, has gathered fleets and forces in secret. They seek to challenge me, and to destroy all who follow the Xylar crown. I need you to plan, lead, and protect not only the capital, but the stability of the galaxy." "Then we begin immediately." The enemy expected conventional tactics, rigid formations, predictable responses, and overconfidence. He would give them none of that. The battle began in the outer systems. Daniel's human-led fleet moved swiftly, bypassing standard patrol routes, striking supply lines, and creating confusion among enemy commanders. Each maneuver was calculated yet unpredictable, forcing the coalition to react instinctively. Where the Xylars relied on psychic coordination and brute force, Daniel relied on improvisation, intuition, and the unexpected. During one engagement, enemy warships cornered a critical human unit. Daniel's mind raced. Traditional strategies would have called for retreat or a direct assault. Instead, he devised a risky maneuver, using small fighter craft to simulate multiple attack vectors, creating illusions of fleet size, while redirecting the main ships behind the enemy to cut off escape routes. The enemy misjudged the humans' movements, collided in confusion, and surrendered without a prolonged fight. Meanwhile, sabotage attempts on the capital were neutralized. Daniel anticipated infiltrators by noticing small anomalies, delayed messages, unusual energy readings, and subtle changes in routine. Using these observations, he intercepted saboteurs and rerouted critical systems before any damage could occur. Each successful intervention reinforced human ingenuity, action guided by perception, analysis, and adaptability. Back in the capital, Lyria watched his progress with increasing admiration. "Humans do not fight like others," she said softly. "They do not rely on fear or power alone. They adapt, improvise, and act decisively. That is why they endure and why they succeed. That is how humans have thrived, whether on Earth or here among the stars. We do not bend to fear. We create solutions." Loyal Xylar forces were strategically positioned to intercept only when necessary, while human ships executed daring maneuvers that the enemy could not anticipate. The first wave of battle was fierce. Explosions lit the void, and psychic pulses from Xylar ships clashed with the enemy's attempts to disrupt communication. Yet Daniel remained calm, orchestrating attacks with precision and creativity. Each decision forced the enemy into confusion, undermining coordination and exploiting weaknesses. Hours into the battle, the enemy commander attempted a desperate strike at the capital itself. Daniel had predicted this move. Using agile human ships, he intercepted the strike, creating diversions and countermeasures that rendered the assault ineffective. The coalition was forced to retreat, their fleets scattered and disorganized. The Empire had survived, and not through sheer power alone, but through adaptability, ingenuity, and leadership. The capital erupted in celebration, yet Daniel did not allow himself to relax. He knew that respect and trust were fragile in such a political environment. One mistake could undo months of effort. Even as others celebrated, he reviewed every operation, every decision, every outcome. Human survival had never relied solely on victory. It relied on learning, adapting, and anticipating what came next. Lyria appeared beside him once more, her golden form glowing against the backdrop of the city. "Captain Hart," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with admiration. "You have done what none could do. The Empire stands not just because of power, but because of your mind, your courage, and your decisiveness. You have proven the value of humans beyond what I imagined." Humans brought balance, creativity where there was rigidity, action where there was hesitation, and courage where there was fear. "I am honored," Daniel said, "but it was not just me. Humans and Xylers working together made this possible. We adapt, we learn, we act, and we survive together. Few species would have succeeded, and fewer still would have done so without arrogance or fear. You have earned my recognition and my trust." Allies were strengthened, and systems that had been vulnerable were fortified. Daniel continued to guide, advise, and lead with the same principles: adaptability, initiative, and human ingenuity. In the quiet moments, Daniel reflected on the journey. He had arrived expecting to be a diplomat, a representative of Earth, and perhaps a survivor of an alien empire's scrutiny. Instead, he had become a leader in ways he had never anticipated, navigating political intrigue, commanding fleets, and influencing the course of entire systems. Humanity had been underestimated, and in proving themselves capable, they had altered the perception of an entire empire. One evening, as Daniel walked with Lyria along the palace gardens suspended above the city, she spoke quietly. "You have not bowed, you have not submitted, and yet you have risen higher than any other before you. That is rare, human. That is why I said you are my husband, not in the way you imagine, but in the way that matters. You balance me, you challenge me, and you act when others falter. But I see now, humans have a role to play, not just in your empire, but in the galaxy. We survive because we think, adapt, and act, and we will continue to do so. The empire will endure and thrive because of this partnership." And through it all, they had not bent, they had stood, acted, and led. The Queen, Lyria, smiled at him. "You have shown the true nature of your species: courage, creativity, and independence. You are unlike any other. That is why you are my partner. Together, we will shape the future." Humans had proven their value in ways the galaxy had never imagined, and now, standing beside the Queen, Daniel understood that survival was only the first step. Influence, innovation, and courage would define the future. And as he looked at the stars stretching endlessly before him, Daniel Hart realized that humanity had not only survived, they had risen. They had stood when others bowed. They had acted when others hesitated. They had proven that intelligence, courage, and ingenuity were more powerful than fear, power, or submission. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of humanity in the Xyler Empire, and there would be no turning back. Daniel's journey had begun with a simple refusal to kneel. That refusal had sparked curiosity, respect, and recognition. It had revealed the potential of a species that many had underestimated, and it had forged a partnership that would shape the future of countless worlds. As the stars shimmered beyond the capital city, Daniel understood a fundamental truth. Humans did not bend because they feared, nor did they act for glory alone. They survived, they adapted, and they created solutions where others could only see obstacles. That was the essence of their strength. The Xyler Empire had found its balance. Humanity had found its place. And Captain Daniel Hart, standing tall beside the Queen, knew that the story of humans among the stars was only beginning. The galaxy would never forget the day humans refused to kneel, and in doing so, rose higher than anyone had imagined.